Ladies and gentlemen, we spend our lives clinging to names, forms, beliefs, identities, goals, and fears. But what if the very act of clinging is the root of our suffering? What if freedom is not found in grasping, but in letting go? Imagine standing by a river. The water flows effortlessly, never holding on, never resisting, and yet in that flow, in that constant change, it is alive, pure, untroubled, and whole. Now imagine trying to grasp that water. The tighter you squeeze, the less you hold. This is what we do with life. We try to trap it, freeze it, define it, control it. But life is not a solid object. It is movement, change, rhythm. To live is to flow, and to flow one must let go. We've been taught to chase after meaning, purpose, success, as if these things lie somewhere outside ourselves. We imagine there's a final destination, a point at which all will be resolved and the puzzle will be complete. But this is the great illusion, that life is a problem to be solved rather than a mystery to be lived. Letting go does not mean apathy, nor does it mean carelessness. It is the recognition that we are not the controllers of the universe. The sun does not rise because we command it. Our breath comes and goes without us doing a thing. Thoughts appear in the mind as clouds in the sky, but we do not author them. When we look closely, we find we are not the thinker of thoughts, but the awareness in which thoughts arise and dissolve. The ego, this idea of a separate self, is the grand illusion. It tells us we are apart from the world, from each other, from the present moment. It whispers that we must defend, compare, compete. But this ego is nothing but a mask, a story. And like all stories, it is made of language, assumptions, and the past. When we see through it, we find a spaciousness, a freedom that cannot be touched by success or failure, praise or blame. To live beyond illusions is not to deny the world, but to see it clearly, to see that form is emptiness and emptiness is form. Everything arises dependent on everything else. No wave exists without the ocean. No self exists without the whole. We are not drops in the ocean. We are the ocean, in the form of a drop. So, what happens when we let go? When we no longer cling to roles, titles, and outcomes? We become like music, no longer trying to reach the last note, but dancing within the harmony of the moment. The tree does not force itself to grow. The flower does not struggle to bloom, and yet they do so with perfect grace. This is the way of nature, and this is our way too. If only we stop resisting. You do not need to become anything. You are already that which you seek. Behind the masks, beyond the thoughts, deeper than any desire is a stillness, a presence that has never been touched by time. It is there in silence, in laughter, in tears. It is not something to gain, but something to remember. Letting go is the most courageous act because it means releasing who we think we are. It is a falling into trust. Not trust in fate or some outside force, but trust in life itself as it is. And when we fall into this trust, we find we are held by something vast, silent, and beyond comprehension. This is the paradox. When you stop chasing, you are found. When you stop grasping, you are free. When you let go of what you are not, you awaken to what you are. And that right there is liberation. We begin life with open hands, but somewhere along the way, we're taught to clutch, to grab hold of ideas, identities, ambitions, relationships, anything that might give us a sense of security or meaning. But life by its very nature slips through our fingers. It flows, it changes, it moves like a river. The more we try to capture it, the more it escapes us. In this endless attempt to hold on, we create our own suffering. We worry, we fear, we become anxious about things not going our way. The problem is not with life, it's with the clinging. When we release that tight grip, even for a moment, we glimpse a strange kind of peace. Not the peace of having everything in order, but the peace of not needing to. There is a deeply rooted illusion that life must be figured out, planned perfectly, and controlled for happiness to be possible. We chase after success, status, and certainty as if these will solve the puzzle. But what if there's no puzzle? What if life was never meant to be solved? What if the attempt to solve it is the very thing that keeps us from experiencing it fully? This obsession with control and understanding comes from the mind's desire to reduce the unknown into something safe. But life cannot be reduced. It's messy, mysterious, beautiful, and unpredictable. When we let go of the need to define it, we find that meaning arises naturally in the moment itself, not in some far-off outcome. At the center of this struggle is the ego, the story we tell ourselves about who we are. We believe we are this name, this body, this history. But when we really look, we see that this self is constantly changing. Thoughts arise, emotions pass, sensations shift. What then is the constant? Not the story, but the awareness in which the story appears. The ego is like a costume, a role we play in the theater of life. It's not wrong to play a role, but the mistake is to believe we are the role. Seeing this clearly begins to loosen the grip of fear and judgment. We stop needing to protect an image and begin to relax into something deeper. When we let go of this fixed identity, we begin to live more like nature. A tree does not stress about how tall it grows. A wave doesn't resist the shore. Things happen in perfect harmony, not because they are forced, but because they are allowed to be. This is the natural flow, and when we surrender to that flow, we move with life, not against it. We begin to trust that we don't always need a plan, that uncertainty is not the enemy, and that beauty often emerges when we least expect it. Beneath all of this is something silent and constant, awareness itself. It is not affected by our ups and downs, not disturbed by our thoughts or desires. It is the spaciousness in which all experience occurs. You don't have to earn it or become worthy of it. It's already there, before any thought, before any effort. When we stop identifying with the noise in our heads, we sink into this deeper presence, and there we find a profound sense of freedom. Not the freedom of having everything, but the freedom of needing nothing. Letting go, then, is not a loss. It is a return to what we already are beneath the stories and the struggles. It is not passive. It is the most courageous act. It means choosing to trust the unfolding of life even when we don't understand it. It means no longer needing to control or label every experience. And in that trust, in that surrender, we discover a clarity and joy that was there all along, waiting for us to stop resisting, to stop chasing, and simply to be. We often move through life believing that one day, when everything is finally figured out, we'll be happy. That once we solve the puzzle, find the right job, meet the perfect person, achieve the desired status or spiritual insight, then life will truly begin. This belief, so deeply ingrained, whispers that fulfillment is just around the corner, waiting at the end of some great achievement or moment of clarity. And so we keep reaching, keep striving, constantly projecting our sense of peace and completeness into the future, but the reality is far more subtle and profound. Life was never meant to be solved like a problem. It is not a riddle with a fixed answer. It is more like a piece of music or a dance, meant to be experienced, moved through, and appreciated as it unfolds. The trouble begins when we treat life as a linear path with a final destination. We tell ourselves we're not quite there yet, that we just need to try harder, think more, make better decisions. We become entangled in the illusion that the present moment is a means to an end. We sacrifice now for some imagined later. But what we overlook is that the present is all there ever is. The past is a memory, the future a concept, and both exist only within the mind. Reality, the actual living truth of our experience, is always now. This obsession with improvement, with becoming, blinds us to the miracle of being. We measure ourselves by accomplishments and judge our worth by outcomes, never stopping to question who set those standards or whether they're even real. Our lives become a race, and we run faster, not realizing the finish line keeps moving. And in all of this effort to solve life, to control it and understand it, we forget how to live. We forget the taste of stillness, the sound of silence, the richness of simply being alive, with no goal to reach and nothing to fix. What if we stopped trying to figure it all out? What if we allowed life to remain mysterious, unpredictable, and endlessly changing? This does not mean giving up or being passive. It means opening ourselves to the reality that life cannot be pinned down. Like water, it slips through our fingers when we try to grasp it. But if we cup our hands gently, it rests there. Life flows best when we allow it to move on its own terms, not when we try to force it into a shape of our own making. To let go of the need to solve life is to enter into a state of deep trust. It is to accept that we don't have to know what's next, that we don't need all the answers. It is a surrender to something greater than the thinking mind, something that's been guiding life long before we were aware of it. Birds don't study flight, flowers don't plan their blooming, and yet everything unfolds with a kind of intelligence that isn't learned or controlled. It simply is. When we release the need to grasp, label, and solve, we find ourselves more present, more attuned to the subtle textures of existence. A breeze on the skin, a moment of laughter, the sound of leaves rustling. These small things, often missed when we're preoccupied with figuring everything out, become doorways to something timeless. We realize that the richness of life is found not in its resolution, but in its mystery, not in answers, but in awareness. And in that awareness we find a peace that needs no reason, a peace that arises when we finally stop chasing what we always had. There is a subtle but powerful illusion that underpins much of our suffering, the illusion of the separate self. We walk through the world with the deep-seated belief that we are isolated entities, bounded by our skin, defined by our thoughts, and somehow disconnected from everything around us. This belief is not just philosophical, it colors the way we experience life, the way we react to others, and the way we relate to our own inner world. We say, I did this, I felt that, as though there is a solid, unchanging I somewhere behind our eyes pulling the strings. But if we look closely, if we really examine what this I is, we find something surprising. There's nothing solid there. It's like chasing a shadow. The more we search for this self, the more it disappears into the mist. We might say the self is our thoughts, but thoughts come and go. They're fleeting, inconsistent, and often contradictory. We might say the self is our emotions, but these too are waves rising and falling, changing with circumstances, hormones, and memories. We might say it's our body, but every cell in the body is constantly changing, aging, regenerating. The body of yesterday is not the body of today. So what exactly is this self that we hold on to so tightly? The truth is, it's a story, a collection of memories, preferences, roles, and beliefs that we've come to identify with. It's a narrative we've inherited and rehearsed, but not something inherently real in itself. This sense of a fixed self is a mental construct. It's like a character in a movie who begins to believe that the script is real and that the other actors are separate beings rather than reflections of the same unfolding story. The ego is the actor who has forgotten it is acting. It fears, it compares, it judges, not because it is evil or wrong, but because it believes it is alone. And that belief creates tension. It must defend itself, prove itself, and constantly maintain the illusion that it is in control. But underneath all of this is something more spacious, more silent, more true. Awareness is what remains when all the changing elements of identity are set aside. It is not something we create or attain. It's what has always been there, watching, listening, witnessing. This awareness is not separate from the world around it. It's not inside the head, looking out at the universe like a stranger. It is the universe, conscious of itself through this particular form. The wind outside, the breath within, the sound of your own voice. These are not things apart from you. They are all expressions of the same seamless reality, arising and dissolving in the field of consciousness. When we see through the illusion of ego, we don't become passive or indifferent. In fact, we become more alive, more sensitive, more compassionate. Without the need to protect a false identity, we open up to the flow of life. We see ourselves in others and others in ourselves. We begin to recognize that we are not the wave. We are the ocean, temporarily appearing as a wave, and in that recognition, fear begins to dissolve. There's nothing to protect because there is no boundary. There's nothing to achieve because we're already home. Letting go of the ego is not about destroying anything. It's about seeing clearly, seeing that the person you've been trying so hard to be has always been a mask, and behind that mask is something vast and free, not a better version of you, but the truth of what you are and always have been. That truth needs no name, no praise, no defense. It is complete. It is silence. And it is free as letting go of a fixed identity or rigid expectations allows us to return to a more natural rhythm of life, one that doesn't need to be forced, controlled, or understood in every moment. This rhythm is the same one that guides the changing of seasons, the blooming of flowers, the flow of rivers, and the rising of the sun. Nature doesn't struggle to be what it already is. A tree does not plan how to grow taller. A wave does not decide how to rise or fall. It simply expresses itself in harmony with everything else. And in much the same way, we are part of this natural rhythm. The tension arises when we resist it, when we think we should be something other than what we are, somewhere else than where we are, doing something better than what we're doing. This resistance is what creates conflict. It's not life itself that's the struggle. It's our belief that life should be different. We've been taught that to be successful, to be worthy, we must constantly strive, that we must always be improving, reaching, and pushing ourselves forward. But this constant striving often leads us away from presence and into anxiety. It places us at odds with the very nature of reality, which is effortless unfolding. When we let go of this inner pressure, when we stop trying to bend life to our will, we begin to move more like nature itself. Our actions come from clarity, not fear. We respond rather than react. We create not from lack, but from wholeness. There's a kind of ease that emerges, a gentleness, as though we're finally exhaling after holding our breath for far too long. This doesn't mean we become passive or lazy. In fact, when we are in tune with the natural flow of life, we often become more creative, more inspired, and more engaged. But the energy behind our actions is different. It's not desperate. It's not fueled by the illusion that we must prove ourselves. Instead, it arises spontaneously, like a bird singing in the morning, not because it must, but because it is moved to do so by something deeper than thought. To trust this natural rhythm is to recognize that life is not happening to us, it is happening as us. The wind doesn't blow against the tree, it dances with it. In the same way, events in our lives are not opposing forces, but movements within a larger harmony we may not yet understand. Even the challenges, the losses, the endings, they are part of this unfolding. Letting go means trusting that we don't need to have it all figured out in order to move forward. We simply have to be present with what is and allow the next step to emerge from that presence. When we stop resisting the flow, life begins to feel less like a burden and more like a dance. The pressure to be perfect fades. The need to compare and compete loosens its grip. We start to listen more deeply to others, to ourselves, to life itself. And in that listening, we hear a quiet intelligence guiding us. Not from the mind, but from a deeper place that's always been there. We stop swimming upstream, exhausting ourselves, and begin to move with the current, discovering that it knows the way far better than we do. This is the grace of letting go. It reconnects us with the effortless intelligence of existence. We remember how to trust life again, not as a concept, but as a direct, lived experience. We move not as isolated fragments, but as expressions of something whole. And in that wholeness there is peace, not because everything is perfect, but because we've stopped trying to make it otherwise. Beneath the noise of our thoughts, beneath the ever-changing flow of emotions and the constant activity of the world, there is something still, something silent, something that doesn't come and go. It is always there, like the open sky behind moving clouds. This is awareness, not a thing, not a thought, not an idea, but the quiet space in which everything happens. It is what listens behind your ears, what watches behind your eyes. And the more we turn toward it, the more we realize that this presence is not separate from who we are. It is who we are. Before we ever took on a name, before we learned to say I and mine, we often think of ourselves as the content of our experience, our memories, beliefs, desires, and fears. But these are always changing. What you believed 10 years ago may be completely different now. What you desired last month may seem irrelevant today. So how can any of those things be what you truly are? They are part of your experience, but they are not the experiencer. Just like a screen that allows a movie to be projected onto it, awareness allows all experience to come and go, but is never altered by any of it. The movie may be tragic, beautiful, terrifying, or joyful, but the screen remains untouched. When we stop identifying with the thoughts in our mind, when we stop saying, I am angry or I am broken, and instead begin to notice anger is arising, a thought about failure is appearing, we shift into this deeper awareness. And in that shift we discover freedom. Not the freedom to escape life, but the freedom to meet it without being consumed by it. We realize we do not need to fix everything, understand everything, or even control anything. We only need to rest in the knowing that we are the space in which all of this arises. This presence is not found by chasing it. It's not a state you achieve after years of discipline. In fact, the more you chase it, the more it seems to disappear. That's because it's not something to be gained. It's what you already are. Right now, even as you read this, you are aware. And that awareness is effortless. It's not something you are doing, it's something that is. You don't have to try to be aware, just like the sun doesn't try to shine. It just does. The beauty of this realization is that it doesn't ask you to become someone else. It doesn't ask you to perfect yourself. It simply invites you to stop pretending you are only the voice in your head. That voice, however convincing, is just a small part of the picture. When you rest in the presence behind the voice, you begin to feel a spaciousness, a sense of being held, a peace that was never missing, only overlooked. This is the peace that doesn't depend on conditions. It doesn't rely on external validation, on success, on relationships, or on having the right answers. It is simply the peace of being, the quiet joy of existing without needing to justify that existence. In this space, you are not your past, not your future, not your failures, not your failures. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which all those thoughts arise and dissolve. And once you truly see this, even for a moment, it changes everything. Life no longer feels like a problem to be solved or a burden to carry. It becomes something to witness, to participate in, to move through with openness and wonder. And even when storms come, as they always do, you are no longer lost in the storm. You are the sky itself, vast and untouched. Letting go is often misunderstood as giving up, as if it means surrendering to helplessness or failure. But in truth, letting go is a powerful act of inner freedom. It is the release of the illusion that we must control everything, that life must unfold according to our plans, that we must be someone specific, or that we must avoid all discomfort. Letting go is not passive resignation. It is an active, conscious trust in the intelligence of life itself. It's a recognition that we don't need to hold the universe together. It was never ours to carry in the first place. We are conditioned to believe that control equals safety. From childhood we are taught to plan, to protect, to manage every detail, to fear the unknown. And yet the unknown is all there truly is. The future is never certain. The next moment is unwritten. Every breath we take is a step into mystery. And despite all our attempts to secure ourselves against this uncertainty, life keeps reminding us that we are not in charge. Plans change. People leave. The unexpected arrives without warning. And it is in these moments, when our grip fails, when our carefully built walls fall apart, that we are given the opportunity to discover something deeper. That deeper truth is trust. Not trust in a belief system or a dogma, but a raw, wordless trust in life as it is. Trust that we don't need to always understand, fix, or control. Trust that even when we don't know what's coming, we will meet it as we are, open, aware, and present. This kind of trust is not built on certainty, it is built on surrender. Not the surrender of defeat, but the surrender of resistance. We often live in fear of letting go because we believe we are defined by what we hold on to. Our identities, our goals, our relationships, our stories, but the paradox is that the more we cling, the more we suffer. The more we try to force life to obey our ideas, the more tension we create. When we finally let go, not because we've given up, but because we see the futility of control, we begin to feel light, spacious, free. We stop resisting what is. We allow ourselves to meet reality without filters or conditions, and in that allowing we find peace. This does not mean we lose our ability to act or make decisions. In fact, letting go often brings greater clarity. When we are no longer clouded by fear or driven by the need to manipulate outcomes, our actions come from a place of stillness and wisdom. We begin to respond rather than react. We begin to move with life rather than against it. Our choices become more aligned, more natural, like the way a bird flies or a stream flows. This kind of surrender opens us to something beyond the limited perspective of the ego. It opens us to a field of intelligence that does not come from the mind but from life itself, a kind of knowing that doesn't need proof, a guidance that isn't logical but deeply felt. When we move from this space, we are no longer separate fragments struggling to survive. We are part of the whole, dancing with it, trusting it. So letting go is not the end of effort, it is the end of struggle. It is a return to harmony with the way things already are. And from that harmony, a quiet strength arises. Not the strength to force things, but the strength to flow, to adapt, to meet each moment as it comes. In that freedom, life becomes less of a fight and more of an unfolding mystery. We stop trying to write the story and we begin to live it, word by word, breath by breath, with nothing to hold on to and nothing to fear.